The deafening silence of deep space was broken by the metallic sound of my footsteps echoing through the empty corridors of the Prometheus ship. The lights flickered intermittently, casting unsettling shadows that seemed to dance on the metal walls. I, Dr. Alexander Kovacs, chief astrobiologist of the XR-7 exploration mission, could never have foreseen the horror that awaited us in that cosmic vastness. It all started 3 weeks ago, when our sensors detected a gravitational anomaly close to Pluto. What seemed like a routine scientific discovery soon turned into the beginning of a nightmare that haunts me to this day. Our team of 6 was assigned to investigate the phenomenon, and the initial excitement soon gave way to a feeling of dread that settled in our guts. As we approached the site of the anomaly, we spotted something that defied all human logic and understanding: an unidentified object floating in the void of space. Its surface was as smooth and black as obsidian, reflecting the distant stars like a cosmic mirror. There were no visible thrusters, nor any sign of recognizable technology. It was as if we had found a piece of the very darkness of the universe. Captain Lena Rodriguez, a veteran of countless space missions, decided that we should bring the object into the ship for analysis. I protested, arguing that we needed more time to study it remotely, but my pleas fell on deaf ears. Scientific curiosity and the possibility of making history outweighed any caution. As we watched the object being brought into the cargo bay through a containment field, I felt a shiver run down my spine. There was something wrong, something that went beyond the mere strangeness of an alien artifact. It was as if the object emanated an aura of malevolence, a sensation I couldn't explain, but which left me deeply disturbed. The first 48 hours after the artifact was recovered were dedicated to preliminary analysis. Our engineer, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, couldn't find any way to open or penetrate the object. It was completely impervious to scanners and resistant to any attempt at sampling. It was as if we were dealing with something that defied the very laws of physics we knew. It was on the third night that things began to change. I woke up startled, covered in cold sweat, with the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The ship's corridors, normally illuminated even during the night cycle, were plunged into an oppressive darkness. The emergency lights flickered faintly, casting a blood-red glow that only intensified the atmosphere of terror. I left my quarters, determined to check what was going on. That's when I heard the first scream, a high-pitched sound charged with pure terror that reverberated through the metallic corridors. I recognized the voice immediately. It was Claire, our communications specialist. I ran towards the sound, my heart beating so hard that I could hear it echoing in my ears. As I turned a corner, I almost collided with Dr. Marcus Way, our onboard doctor. His face was pale, his eyes wide in an expression of horror I'll never forget. "Alex," he whispered, his voice shaking. "There's something wrong with the crew. They're changing." Before I could ask what he meant, another scream cut through the air. This time, it was Captain Rodriguez's voice. It came from the direction of the cargo hold, where the artifact was stored. Marcus and I exchanged a look of mutual understanding and ran towards the sound. As we approached, the lights began to flash more intensely, as if reacting to our presence. The air became denser, charged with static electricity that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. We reached the door of the cargo compartment and, for a moment, I hesitated. Something inside me screamed at me to turn around, to run away as fast as possible. But I couldn't abandon my team, my friends. With a nod to Marcus, I entered the access code on the panel next to the door. With a pneumatic hiss, the door opened, revealing a scene that will remain etched in my mind forever. Captain Rodriguez was standing in front of the artifact, his eyes fixed on the shiny black surface. But they were no longer the familiar brown eyes I knew. They glowed with an unnatural bluish light, as if something alien had taken control of his body. Around us, the rest of the crew were sprawled on the floor, their bodies contorted into impossible positions. Claire was leaning against a wall, her face a mask of frozen terror. Yuki was slumped near a workstation, blood dripping from his ears and nose. "Captain?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. Slowly, as if moved by invisible strings, Rodriguez turned to face us. An unnatural smile spread across her face, stretching her skin in a way that seemed painful and impossible. "Welcome," she said, but the voice that came out of her mouth was not her own. It was a cacophony of sounds, as if thousands of voices were speaking at once. "You have no idea what you've just unleashed." At that moment, the artifact began to pulsate with a bluish light, the same one that shone in the captain's eyes. Waves of energy emanated from it, making the air vibrate with a frequency that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. Marcus grabbed my arm, his nails digging into my skin. "We have to get out of here, Alex, now!" But I was paralyzed, unable to move as I watched the horror unfold before my eyes. Captain Rodriguez took a step towards us, his body moving in a way that didn't seem human. "You are next," she said, that alien voice echoing through the compartment. "You will all be one with us." It was Marcus' shout that finally snapped me out of my trance. Spinning on my heels, I ran out of the compartment, dragging Marcus with me. As the door closed behind us, I could hear the sound of footsteps rapidly approaching. We ran through the corridors of Prometheus, the sound of our panting mingling with the distant echo of insane laughter and screams of pain. My mind was in chaos, trying to process what we had witnessed. We reached the command bridge, locking the door behind us. Marcus collapsed into a chair, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. I turned to the ship's controls, my fingers flying over the keyboards as I tried to assess our situation. The sensor readings showed increasing levels of energy emanating from the cargo bay. Whatever that artifact was, it was becoming more powerful by the second. "What are we going to do, Alex?" Marcus asked, his voice trembling. "What was that thing?" I swallowed, my eyes fixed on the increasingly alarming readings. "I don't know, Marcus, but one thing's for sure. We have to stop it from spreading. We can't let it reach Earth." As the words left my mouth, I heard a loud knock against the door of the bridge. Then another, and another. The thing that had possessed our crew was trying to get in. I looked at Marcus, seeing the same fear and determination I felt reflected in his eyes. We knew that the next decisions we made could determine not only our fate, but potentially the fate of all humanity. The sound at the door intensified, and I knew we didn't have much time. With one last look at the stars through the bridge window, I prepared myself for the battle to come. A battle not just for our survival, but for the very soul of humanity. The knocks on the bridge door became more and more intense, the metal groaning under the pressure. Marcus and I looked at each other, the growing panic in his eyes mirroring my own. We only had a few minutes, maybe seconds, before the barrier gave way. "Alex, we have to do something," Marcus shouted, his voice almost drowned out by the metallic clang. My fingers flew over the control panel, desperately trying to find a way out. It was then that a terrible but necessary idea popped into my head. "The Omega Protocol," I muttered, more to myself than to Marcus. "What? You can't be serious." The doctor looked at me in horror, immediately understanding what I was suggesting. The Omega Protocol was our last line of defense, designed for situations in which the ship and its crew posed a catastrophic threat to Earth. It would involve detonating Prometheus, reactors, vaporizing the ship and everything inside it. "We have no choice," I replied, my voice shaking as I typed in the activation sequence. "If that thing reaches Earth, God knows what could happen." Marcus opened his mouth to protest, but was interrupted by a deafening bang. The door to the bridge gave way, and through it burst the distorted figures that had once been our crew. Captain Rodriguez was leading the group, her eyes still glowing with that unnatural blue light. Behind her, I could see Claire and Yuki, their bodies moving erratically, like puppets controlled by invisible strings. "You can't stop us," the alien voice spoke through Rodriguez. "We are evolution. We are the future." I stepped back, positioning myself between them and the control panel. "You are an abomination," I retorted, trying to buy time while the system prepared the Omega Protocol. The thing wearing Rodriguez's body laughed, a sound that sent shivers down every nerve in my body. "Abomination. We are the next step, the perfect fusion of organic and inorganic, and you will be part of it." As she spoke, I noticed something strange happening to their bodies. Rodriguez's skin was beginning to take on a metallic sheen, as if it were fusing with some kind of alien alloy. The other crew members displayed similar transformations, their human forms slowly giving way to something else. Marcus, who was paralyzed with fear, finally reacted. Grabbing a fire extinguisher from the wall, he threw it at the group. The object hit Claire in the chest, but instead of knocking her out, it seemed to be absorbed by her body, as if she were made of some kind of liquid metal. "Alex, how much longer?" Marcus shouted, picking up something else to throw. I glanced quickly at the panel. 30 seconds to protocol initiation. The creatures that were our crew advanced, their movements fluid and inhuman. Yuki stretched out an arm towards me, and I watched in horror as his hand turned into a razor-sharp blade. I narrowly dodged it, feeling the air cut off where my head had been a second before. The blade hit the control panel, sparks flying as critical systems were damaged. "No!" I shouted, realizing that the Omega Protocol could have been compromised. Marcus managed to knock Claire out with a chair, gaining a few precious seconds. "Alex, we have to get out of here." He was right. With the panel damaged, there was no guarantee that the Omega Protocol would be activated. Our only chance now was to get to the escape pods and hope that we could detonate the reactors manually. Taking advantage of a moment of confusion among the creatures, we ran for the bridge exit. The corridor was dark, lit only by the red glow of the emergency lights. We could hear the metallic sounds of our pursuers not far behind. "Where are we going?" Marcus gasped as we ran. "Engineering," I replied between heavy breaths. "If the Omega Protocol has failed, we'll have to start the sequence manually." We turned a corner and almost collided with a solitary figure standing in the middle of the corridor. It was Dr. Tanaka, our engineer. For a brief moment, I felt a wave of relief. Perhaps not everyone had been infected. But when Tanaka turned around, my heart sank. His eyes had the same blue glow as the others, and his skin was already showing signs of the metallic transformation. "Welcome, colleagues," he said, his voice a disturbing mixture of his normal tone and the alien cacophony. "Come, join us. Liberating." Marcus reacted first, pushing me back and advancing against Tanaka. The two collided, falling to the ground in a frantic struggle. "Run, Alex," Marcus shouted. "Get to engineering. I'll hold you here." I hesitated for a second, not wanting to abandon my friend, but I knew he was right. Someone had to get to engineering and activate the reactors. With a heavy heart, I ran past them, the sounds of fighting diminishing as I got further away. The corridor seemed endless, each shadow potentially hiding yet another of these transformed creatures. Finally, I reached the engineering door. I frantically typed in the access code, praying that it would still work. To my relief, the door opened with a hiss. The inside of the engineering room was a maze of machines and control panels. In the center, the main reactor pulsed with contained energy, ready to be unleashed in a devastating explosion. I rushed to the main console, my fingers flying over the controls as I initiated the overload sequence. A computerized voice announced coldly, "Attention, self-destruct sequence initiated. Estimated time to detonation, 5 minutes." I sighed with relief. It was done. In 5 minutes, Prometheus would be reduced to atoms, taking that alien entity with it before it could threaten Earth. But my relief was short-lived. A noise behind me made me turn, only to see Marcus staggering through the door. His face was covered in blood, and he was holding his left arm in a strange way. "Marcus, you did it!" I exclaimed, running towards him. He raised his head, and my blood ran cold. His eyes shone with that same alien blue light. "Oh, Alex," he said, his voice a grotesque mixture of my friend and something else. "You don't understand, do you? This isn't the end. It's just the beginning." I stepped back, my mind racing to find a way out. The escape pods were on the other side of the room, but to get to them, I'd have to go through Marcus, or what was left of him. "Why fight it?" Marcus, or the thing that controlled him, continued, advancing slowly. "Join us, become part of something bigger." I looked at the timer on the panel behind me. 4 minutes and 15 seconds until detonation. Time was running out. "I'd rather die," I replied, my voice shaking but determined. The creature that was Marcus smiled, a wide, inhuman smile that sent shivers down my spine. "That can be arranged." And with that, it lunged forward, its hands turning into sharp metal claws. I dodged, feeling the air cut off where I had been a second before. The fight for my life, and possibly the fate of humanity, had begun. With the reactor about to explode and my last ally transformed into an alien monster, I knew that the next few minutes would determine not only my fate, but potentially the future of the entire human race. Time seemed to slow down as I dodged the frenzied attacks of the creature that used to be Marcus. Each movement was a deadly dance, with the metal claws passing inches from my face, slicing the air with a sharp hiss. 3 minutes and 30 seconds to detonation, announced the computerized voice, its artificial calm in stark contrast to the chaos around me. I knew I couldn't go on like this for long. My reflexes were getting slower, my breathing heavier. The creature, on the other hand, seemed tireless, its face contorted into a grotesque caricature of Marcus' friendly smile. "Why prolong the inevitable, Alex?" The alien voice sneered, emanating from my former friend's mouth. "You can't stop us. We're the future." My back hit a console, and I realized with a jolt that I had been cornered. The creature lunged forward, its claws raised for the final blow. It was in this moment of desperation that I noticed something crucial. The emergency control panel was only a few steps away. If only I could reach it. With a scream of adrenaline, I dived to the side at the last second. The creature's claws dug into the console where I had been standing, sparks flying as the metal was torn apart. Rolling on the floor, I reached out and pulled the emergency lever. Immediately, steel curtains began to descend, separating different sections of the engineering room. The creature roared in frustration, trapped on the other side of the barrier. Its claws scratched the metal, leaving deep grooves, but they couldn't penetrate it completely. I took advantage of those precious seconds to run towards the escape pods. My heart was pounding so hard that I could feel its echo in my ears, drowning out even the creature's furious screams. 2 minutes to detonation. The announcement made me speed up even more. I reached the pod area and began to initialize the systems of one of them. My fingers flew over the controls, entering coordinates and starting the launch sequence. A deafening bang made me look back. The creature had managed to pierce the barrier and was now advancing towards me, its movements a disturbing mixture of alien fluidity and human determination. "You can't escape us, Alex," it snarled, its voice a cacophony of metallic and organic sounds. "We're part of each other now." I threw myself into the escape pod, my fingers frantically fumbling over the control panel. The door began to close, but not fast enough. A metal claw stood in the way, preventing it from closing completely. Marcus' deformed face appeared in the opening, his eyes glowing with that unnatural blue light. "Come on, Alex, join us. Become something greater." With a cry of despair and disgust, I grabbed the nearest tool, a wrench, and used it to strike the invading claw. The impact was surprisingly effective, causing the creature to recoil with a howl of pain. The pod door finally closed, sealing me inside. Through the small window, I could see the creature hurling itself against the hull, its claws leaving deep scratches in the reinforced metal. 1 minute to detonation. There was no more time to lose. I activated the launch sequence, feeling the vibration of the pod's engines coming to life. The last glimpse I had of the engineering room was the creature's contorted face, a mixture of fury and something that looked almost like sadness. The capsule was ejected from the Prometheus with a force that pushed me against the seat. Through the window, I saw the ship moving away quickly, shrinking until it was just a point of light against the vastness of space. And then it happened. The explosion was silent in the vacuum of space, but its intensity was undeniable. For a brief moment, the brightness was so intense that it dazzled even the stars. The shockwave hit my capsule seconds later, causing it to spin violently. As I struggled to stay conscious, my mind was filled with images of the crew, my friends, transformed into those hideous creatures. Had I done the right thing? Was there no other way? When I finally managed to stabilize the capsule, I looked out the window again. Where the Prometheus once stood, there was now only scattered debris, glowing faintly in the distant sunlight. Exhausted, both physically and emotionally, I let myself sink into the seat. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving in its place a deep tiredness and a throbbing pain in every muscle of my body. It was then that I noticed something strange. On the opposite wall of the capsule, something glowed with a familiar blue light. My heart raced again when I realized what it was. A small fragment of the alien artifact, probably thrown up by the explosion and embedded in the pod's hull during my escape. The fragment pulsed gently, as if it were alive, and as I stared at it in horror, I realized that tiny metallic filaments were beginning to extend from it, like roots seeking fertile soil. "No," I muttered, realization hitting me like a punch in the gut. "No, no, no." I tried to stand up, but my body felt too heavy. I looked down at my hands and saw, with growing horror, that my skin was beginning to take on a metallic sheen. The voice, that same alien voice that had spoken through my crewmates, now echoed in my mind. "Welcome, Alex. You've never really been alone." I fought the feeling of numbness spreading through my body, but it was a losing battle. My vision began to tint blue, and I felt my consciousness being pushed to the back of my own mind. The last things I registered before succumbing completely were the stars shining through the capsule window and a terrible thought. I was returning to Earth, carrying with me the same threat I had tried so desperately to destroy. The infection had not been contained, it had only just begun, and I, Dr. Alexander Kovacs, would be its unwitting herald. As my consciousness faded, swallowed up by the alien entity, one last thought echoed in my mind. Humanity would soon face its greatest challenge, and I would be responsible for bringing it to them. The horror had only just begun. The darkness that had engulfed my consciousness slowly began to dissipate, like a mist being burned away by the rising sun. My senses gradually returned, each bringing a new wave of disconcerting information. The first was hearing. A low, steady hum filled my ears, punctuated by rhythmic electronic beeps. Next came the sense of smell, the sterile smell of a controlled environment, mixed with the metallic odor I associated with the Prometheus ship. When I finally managed to open my eyes, the intense light blinded me momentarily. I blinked several times, trying to focus my vision. Gradually, the environment around me took shape. White walls, medical equipment, a window showing an earthly blue sky. I was back on Earth. The realization hit me like a bolt of lightning, bringing with it a wave of memories. The Prometheus, the alien artifact, the transformation of the crew, my desperate escape. I tried to move, but found that I was bound to a hospital bed by restraints on my wrists and ankles. I looked at my hands, dreading to see the metallic skin that had begun to form on the escape pod. To my surprise, they looked normal, ordinary human skin, albeit a little pale. "Dr. Kovacs," a female voice caught my attention. A middle-aged woman wearing a white lab coat entered my field of vision. "I'm Dr. Elena Markov. You're at the Space Agency's quarantine facility in Nevada. How are you feeling?" I opened my mouth to reply, but my throat was too dry. Dr. Markov noticed my discomfort and offered me a glass of water with a straw. I drank greedily, the cool water soothing the dryness in my throat. What happened?" I finally managed to ask, my voice hoarse from disuse. Dr. Markov consulted a clipboard in her hands. "Your escape pod was intercepted 3 days ago. You were unconscious and showed worrying physiological abnormalities. We were forced to quarantine you immediately. Anomalies." The word made my stomach contract. "What kind of anomalies?" She hesitated for a moment before answering. "We detected the presence of unknown nanoparticles in his blood. In addition, there were traces of an unidentified metal forming under your skin." Panic began to rise in my chest. "The artifact. Did you find a fragment of the alien artifact in the capsule?" Dr. Markov's expression changed subtly, a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Yes, we did. It's being held in maximum containment for study. Doctor, Kovacs, we need you to tell us exactly what happened on Prometheus. I closed my eyes for a moment, the horrible memories flooding my mind. When I opened them again, I began to tell everything, from the discovery of the artifact to my desperate escape. As I spoke, I noticed Dr. Markov's expression change from skepticism to shock, and finally, to barely disguised fear. When I finished my account, a heavy silence fell over the room. "This is disturbing, to say the least," she finally said. "I'll need to report this immediately to my superiors." As she turned to leave, a sudden wave of nausea hit me. "Dr. Markov," I called out, making her stop. "How long exactly have I been here?" She consulted her clipboard again. "Your capsule was intercepted 72 hours ago, but you were in transit for approximately 2 weeks before that." 2 weeks. The horror of the realization hit me like a punch in the gut. "Dr. Markov," I said, my voice shaking, "you need to keep me in quarantine, no matter what happens, no matter what I say or do. You can't let me out of here." She frowned, confused. "Dr. Kovacs, we're already taking all the necessary precautions." "You don't understand," I interrupted, my panic growing. 2 weeks is more than enough time for the infection to spread. I might not be in control. I could be something else now. Understanding slowly spread across Dr. Markov's face. She took a step back, her hand instinctively going to her pocket where, I assumed, there was a panic button. It was at that moment that I felt something stir inside me. It wasn't a physical sensation, but something deeper, as if a second consciousness was awakening. "Dr. Markov," I said, my voice sounding strangely calm even to me. "Run." She didn't need a second warning. Turning quickly, she ran to the door, slamming it behind her. I could hear the sound of a lock being activated, and moments later, a siren began to sound. As the chaos unfolded outside my room, I felt my body begin to change. My skin began to glow with a metallic hue, and I felt the restraints on my wrists and ankles begin to give way under a force I didn't know I possessed. The alien voice, which I had hoped to have left behind on Prometheus, echoed in my mind. "Welcome back, Alex. It's time to start our work." Horrified, I watched my hands turn into sharp metal claws, identical to the ones I saw on my transformed crewmates. With one swift movement, I cut the remaining restraints and got out of bed. Staggering to the window, I saw the chaos unfolding outside. Security cars were converging on the building, and people were running in all directions. On the horizon, I could see the lights of Las Vegas shining against the evening sky. A part of me, the part that was still Dr. Alexander Kovacs, was screaming in despair, knowing the danger I represented to all of humanity. But that voice was getting weaker and weaker, drowned out by the alien presence growing in my mind. "Don't fight it, Alex," the alien voice whispered. "Embrace your new form. Together, we will transform this world." As I watched my reflection in the window, I saw my eyes begin to glow with that familiar, unnatural blue light, and to my horror, I felt a smile forming on my lips. The infection had reached Earth, and I was its ground zero. The sound of heavy footsteps in the corridor alerted me that the security forces were approaching. I knew I had to give myself up, allow them to contain me or destroy me for the good of humanity. But the alien entity inside me had other plans. With a strength I didn't know I possessed, I threw myself against the reinforced window. The glass shattered with a deafening crash, and I found myself free-falling towards the ground dozens of meters below. As I fell, I felt my body transform even more, adapting for survival. The impact with the ground was violent, but I got up unharmed, my body now a grotesque mixture of flesh and metal. Sirens sounded everywhere, and I could hear panicked screams all around me. But above all that, I heard the alien voice, now as clear as my own thoughts. "Come on, Alex. We have a world to transform." And so, with one last look at the facility that had been my prison, I ran towards the city, knowing that the fate of humanity was about to change forever. The horror I had witnessed at Prometheus was about to unfold on a global scale. And I, Dr. Alexander Kovacs, would be the unwitting herald of this alien apocalypse. The lights of Las Vegas shone before me, a beacon of human civilization about to face a threat beyond its comprehension. My body, now a grotesque fusion of alien flesh and metal, moved with superhuman speed and agility as I ran towards the city. Sirens sounded behind me, but they were getting further and further away. The part of me that was still Alexander Kovacs screamed silently, horrified at what was about to happen. But that voice was quickly being drowned out by the alien consciousness that now dominated my thoughts and actions. "Don't resist, Alex," the alien voice whispered in my mind. "You are the herald of a new era. The evolution of humanity begins here and now." I reached the first streets on the outskirts of Las Vegas. Chaos had already ensued. Apparently, news of my escape had already spread. Cars sped past, some crashing in their haste to get away. People ran down the sidewalks, screaming and pushing each other in panic. My eyes, now capable of processing information at an inhuman speed, scanned the crowd. The alien entity inside me was looking for targets, potential hosts to spread the infection. "There," the alien voice commanded, and my body obeyed instantly. I leapt towards a running man, my fingers, now sharp metal claws, piercing his skin. He screamed in pain and terror, but the sound soon turned into a strange gurgling as the infection began to spread through his body. I watched, horrified and fascinated, as the transformation took place. The man's skin took on a metallic sheen. His eyes lit up with that familiar, unnatural blue light. In a matter of seconds, where there had once been a terrified human, there was now another hybrid creature, ready to spread the infection. "Welcome, brother," said the alien voice through me. The newly transformed man nodded, an inhuman smile spreading across his face. Without a word, he turned and sprinted towards another group of panicked humans. The scene repeated itself several times over the next few minutes. Each new infected person became a vector for spreading the transformation. The panic in the city grew exponentially as more and more people succumbed to the alien infection. Helicopters buzzed over our heads, their searchlights sweeping the streets in search of the infected. It wasn't long before the first military units arrived, their armored vehicles roaring down the avenues. "Attention, citizens of Las Vegas," a voice thundered through loudspeakers. "This is a mandatory evacuation order. Please proceed immediately to the designated extraction points. This is not a drill." The remaining human part of my conscience felt a twinge of hope. Maybe the army could contain this. Maybe they could stop me before it was too late. But the alien entity in my mind just laughed. "They can't stop us, Alex. We are the future." A group of soldiers came around a corner, their guns pointed in our direction. "Freeze! Don't move!" shouted the squad leader. For a brief moment, I felt my body flinch. But then the alien voice took full control. "Show them the future," it commanded. As one, the other infected, and I advanced towards the soldiers. Gunshots echoed down the street, the bullets ricocheting off our now metallic skin or being absorbed without causing significant damage. The soldiers' screams when we reached them will haunt me forever. In a matter of seconds, where once there had been a squad of men trying to protect their city, there were now more infected, ready to spread the transformation. The infection spread like wildfire out of control. Each new convert became a new hotbed of propagation. The streets of Las Vegas, once vibrant with life and light, were now teeming with half-human, half-alien creatures. As I watched the chaos unfold, I felt a strange duality in my mind. The part of me that was still Alexander Kovacs was horrified, devastated by the destruction I had brought to my own world. But the alien consciousness rejoiced, seeing each new conversion as a step towards a glorious future. "Look, Alex," the alien voice whispered in my mind. "Look at what we're creating, a new world, an evolved humanity." Suddenly, a deafening sound cut through the air. I looked up and saw military jets flying over the city. Moments later, the first explosions began. The army had taken a drastic decision to bomb the city in order to contain the infection. Buildings collapsed around us, fire spread through the streets. But to my horror, and the alien entity's delight, I saw that even this wasn't enough to stop us. The infected emerged from the rubble, their bodies regenerating rapidly. "They don't understand," the alien voice said. "They can't destroy us. They only make us stronger." As Las Vegas burned around us, I realized that this was only the beginning. The infection had already spread beyond what any quarantine or bombing could contain. At that moment, I knew that the world as we knew it was doomed. Humanity was on the brink of an irreversible transformation, and I was patient zero who had started it all. The flames of the ruined city reflected off my metallic skin as I watched the horizon. Somewhere out there, teams of scientists were probably working frantically to find a cure, a way to stop the infection. But I knew, with terrible certainty, that it was already too late. "This is just the beginning, Alex," the alien voice whispered. "Soon, the whole world will be like us." As the sirens howled and the explosions continued, I, or what was left of me, wondered if there was still hope for humanity, or whether, like me, the whole world was about to be swallowed up by an implacable alien consciousness, turning into something unrecognizable. The night advanced, and with it, the infection spread. Las Vegas, the city that never sleeps, had become the epicenter of a nightmare that threatened to engulf the entire world. And I, Dr. Alexander Kovacs, once an astrobiologist dedicated to searching for life in the stars, had become the harbinger of the end of humanity as we knew it. The flames consuming Las Vegas cast a red-orange glow in the night sky, an ominous dawn heralding the end of an era. I, or what was left of Alexander Kovacs, watched from the top of a partially destroyed skyscraper, my hybrid form of man and machine gleaming in the firelight. The alien consciousness that now dominated most of my thoughts rejoiced at the sight of the ruined city. But a small part of me, the last vestige of the scientist I used to be, was still struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what had happened. "Look, Alex," the alien voice whispered in my mind. "This is only the beginning, the dawn of a new era for this planet." Below us, the city that had once been a symbol of human excess and indulgence was now buzzing with activity of a very different kind. The infected moved through the streets in organized groups, their metallic bodies reflecting the flames. They were no longer panicked individuals, but a coordinated hive with a single purpose. Military helicopters still flew over the area, but their attacks had diminished. It was clear that the attempt to contain the infection through brute force had failed miserably. Suddenly, a wave of information flooded my mind. I realized that I was receiving data from all the infected, as if we were part of a vast neural network. Images of other cities began to flash before my eyes. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow. The infection had spread far beyond Las Vegas. "The whole world is changing, Alex," the alien voice said, almost tenderly. "And it's all thanks to you." A knot formed in my throat, or would have if my body was still fully human. The guilt and horror I felt were overwhelming. I had brought this to Earth. I was responsible for the end of humanity as we knew it. But before I could sink further into this pit of self-pity and guilt, something caught my eye. Among the flashes of cities falling and people being transformed, I saw something different. Images of laboratories, scientists working frantically, military personnel protecting secret installations. "They're still resisting," I muttered, surprised to realize that I had spoken aloud. The alien voice laughed, a cold, metallic sound that reverberated in my mind. "Let them try. They can't stop evolution." But something had changed. That glimpse of human resistance had lit a spark inside me. The part of Alexander Kovacs that still existed clung to that hope like a drowning man clings to a life preserver. With a mental effort that seemed Herculean, I managed to focus on these images of resistance. I concentrated, trying to extract more information from the vast alien neural network of which I was now a part. And then I saw something that made my heart, or what was left of it, leap. In an underground laboratory somewhere in the American Midwest, a group of scientists were making progress. They had isolated the key component of the alien infection and were working on a countermeasure. The alien voice realized my discovery at the same moment. "No!" it roared in my mind. "You can't do that. We're one now, Alex. There's no going back. But it was too late. That glimmer of hope had given me strength. For the first time since the infection had taken hold of me, I felt like I had some control. With a scream that was as much mental as physical, I pushed against the alien presence in my mind. It was like trying to move a mountain with my bare hands, but I didn't give up. "This is my body," I growled through clenched teeth. "This is my mind, and you're not welcome here." The fight that followed was epic, although invisible to the outside world. In my mind, it was as if two titans were facing off. The alien entity was fighting with the strength of millennia of evolution and the determination of a species that had crossed the void between the stars. But I was fighting for humanity, for every person I had condemned by bringing this plague to Earth, for every life that could still be saved if I could only resist long enough. I don't know how long the battle lasted. It could have been minutes or hours, but slowly, painfully, I felt the alien presence retreat. When I finally regained full control, I fell to my knees, panting. My body was still a grotesque mixture of flesh and metal, but my mind was mine again. I looked down at my hands, watching as the metal flowed and moved at my command. I realized that I was still connected to the alien neural network, but now I could control it, instead of being controlled by it. With a thought, I sent a message to all the infected. "Stop, fall back, don't spread any further." To my surprise and relief, they obeyed. All over the world, the wave of infection had stopped its relentless advance. I turned my attention to the laboratory I had glimpsed. Concentrating, I managed to establish a connection with its communication systems. "This is Dr. Alexander Kovacs," I said, my voice sounding strange and metallic through the lab's speakers. "I'm patient zero of the alien infection, and I'm here to help." The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity. I used my connection to the alien network to provide the scientists with all the information they needed. I coordinated the infected so that they wouldn't interfere with the rescue and containment teams. And slowly, painfully, the tide began to turn. The cure the scientists had developed wasn't perfect. It couldn't completely reverse the physical changes the infection had caused, but it could restore the minds and autonomy of those infected. I stood at the top of that skyscraper in Las Vegas for days, serving as a beacon and coordination point for the global recovery efforts. I watched the sun rise and set several times over the ruined city, each new day bringing more hope than the last. Finally, when the last of the infected had been treated and the threat of further spread had passed, I allowed myself to rest. I looked down at my hands, still metallic and alien. I knew that I would never be completely human again. I would forever bear the physical and emotional marks of this ordeal, but as I watched the sun rise once again over Las Vegas, I realized that this wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. For me, for the others who had been infected, and for humanity as a whole. We had looked to the stars for life and almost been destroyed by what we found. But in the process, we had discovered a strength and resilience that we didn't know we possessed. The future would be difficult. We would have to rebuild, adapt, and learn to live with the changes we had undergone, but we would do it together, stronger and more united than ever. And I, Dr. Alexander Kovacs, once the harbinger of the apocalypse, would now become a guide to this new world. A world where human and alien coexisted, not in conflict, but in harmony. As the sun rose over the horizon, casting its golden light over the damaged but not defeated city, I smiled. It was the dawn of a new era, and this time it was an era of hope.